Hi, this is Anthony DeBarros. I'm the author of Practical SQL, a beginner's guide to storytelling with data from No Starch Press. And today I'd like to talk a little bit about how to run queries in pgAdmin. pgAdmin is the graphical user interface that is the primary tool used for connecting and working with and running queries against PostgreSQL databases. There are many different types of GUI tools out there for use with Postgres, but pgAdmin is probably one of the better known because it's free and open source and comes with some of the installers that you'll find for PostgreSQL. So if we look at the interface for pgAdmin, we'll see that it has a couple of different component areas. First one on the left-hand side is a browser. Sometimes I call it an object browser. This is where you'll see the server that you're connected to, as well as objects that are inside of that particular server. In this case, I'm working with a server on my computer called localhost, and it has 5 databases. If I click on the arrow next to the databases node, I will expand that and be able to see the names of the databases that I'm working with. One of them is called Analysis. That's the database that I use for the book and the code examples in Practical SQL. Under there, you can see a whole bunch of other nodes that have different information about the objects in the database. In this middle section, we have what I would call our working area, and this is where we can work on editing and writing queries and seeing the information that results from the queries that we run. If you select the name of the database that you want to work with, in this case Analysis, and then come up to the Tools menu, click on that and scroll down and select Query Tool. This will open up a query editor, a scratch pad, and a data output area. I rarely use the scratch pad. It's a place where you can keep notes or try different ideas. Typically, I close it and I don't keep it around. I like to have more area to work with in my queries. In the query editor, you can just start typing your typical SQL query, or you can decide to open up a saved file of queries. So I'm going to go do that. I'm going to click on this open file icon. Now, since I already typed in the window, it's going to ask me if I want to discard the changes. I do, so I'm going to click yes. And then it'll open up a typical file open dialog. So in this case, I'm going to look at code from chapter 3 of the book. Double click on it. And then here we have the code from chapter 3. So running a query when you have this text in your query editor is really easy. Let's say that I wanted to run the listing for example 3.3 from the book, which is about how to sort a column using the order by clause in a select query. All you have to do is use your mouse cursor, highlight the query, and then come up to the right arrow, which is the icon for execute and refresh. Click it or press F5 on your keyboard, and you'll see that the results come back fairly quickly, along with some information down here in the status bar. For example, it's telling us it's showing 6 out of the 6 rows that the query returned. Gives us a bit of information on how long the query took to complete. And this information over here on the right refers to the query editor, tells us we're on line 22. In this data output area, we have a data output pane where we see a scrollable collection of the results. We also have messages and notifications. So if I click on messages, I'll see what the Postgres database returned after it ran the query. In this case, it's telling us that the query successfully ran and how long it took and how many rows it returned or were affected. So you can continue to scroll through and run additional queries, highlight them, click, run, etc. If you had one single query in this editor, you could run the whole thing at once just by clicking anywhere and clicking execute refresh. I typically don't do that because sometimes I have perhaps delete statements or other things that I don't want to run. that might not be commented out. So I typically highlight one query at a time and run it. This data output area typically returns rows and columns from the result of the query. It'll tell you the column name and it tells you the data type of the query column result. But if you're working with geospatial data and you're working with the PostGIS database, one of the things that's pretty cool is that the makers of pgAdmin have built in a rudimentary mapping tool or a graphical interface that allows you to see the results of a spatial query. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to go and open up the code for a different chapter of the book. We're going to go to chapter 15, which is the chapter about PostGIS. And if we scroll down to a query that, for example, will result in some type of geospatial data type, in this case, for example, if we run this particular query, we're going to create a geometry data type out of a well-known text string. If we go ahead and run that, you'll see that it does return here under the data output. It returns the data for that geometry result. But you'll notice that it also includes in the column header for the result an icon of a map. And if I click on that, it brings up a map using the OpenStreetMap layer that displays the line string on the map of the geography where it's located. In this case, it's a little bit west of Albany, New York, near Cooperstown. Now, this isn't as robust as working with a full-blown mapping program like QGIS or ArcView, but you can get pretty sophisticated with it in some visualizations. For example, I'm going to scroll down to listing 1518 in my file, where we do an exercise to look at counties that are near a particular location. So in this case, we're going to query our database of counties in the US, and we're going to look for counties that are within a certain distance of Lincoln, Nebraska. And when I run that query, we get the 25 counties that fit the criteria. And if I click on the geometry view, now I can see those counties from the shapefile displayed here. So pretty neat for just a basic exploration of data. So that's a basic look at running queries in pgAdmin. If you'd like to learn more about SQL, of course, please take a look at Practical SQL, a beginner's guide to storytelling with data from No Starch Press. Take care.